The letter arrived like a bomb wrapped in cream-colored stationery, my mother's looping handwriting as delicate as the lies she'd always told. 13 years of silence, and now this showing up in my mailbox on the anniversary of Dad's death, no less. The universe has a sick sense of humor. I'm Rowan, and this wasn't how I planned to spend my morning at Mitchell & Associates Investment Group. The corner office I'd earned through years of calculated moves suddenly felt too small, too warm. Miss Mitchell? Your 10 o'clock is waiting. My assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, but I barely heard her. My fingers traced the edge of the envelope, fighting the urge to shred it into confetti. The return address burned into my retinas, 1542, Oakwood Drive. The house where everything fell apart. Reschedule it, I snapped, immediately regretting my tone. Please. Family emergency. The letter trembled in my hands as I sliced it open. The scent of her perfume wafted up, jasmine and vanilla, the same fragrance she wore when she told 12-year-old me she was leaving with Henry. When she chose him over her own daughter. Dearest Rowan, the letter began. I almost laughed at that. Dearest. As if she had any right to terms of endearment. I know I have no right to reach out after all this time. But things have changed. I've changed. Henry and I are struggling, and I need to make things right. Please, just one meeting. There are things you need to know about your father's death, about the company, about everything. My coffee went cold on the desk as I read the letter 3 more times. Each word felt like a needle under my skin. The company? What could she possibly know about Dad's transportation empire that crashed and burned after his death? The business Henry had gotten his hands on while my mother stood by, watching it all crumble? The phone rang. Uncle Bill's name flashed on the screen. Of course he'd call today, he never forgot what this date meant to me. Hey, kiddo, his warm voice filled the line. Thought you might want company for lunch. I stared at the letter, my throat tight. She wrote to me, Uncle Bill. After all these years, she just. The silence on his end spoke volumes. Finally, what does she want? To talk. Says she needs to tell me something about Dad's death. My laugh came out harsh. Convenient timing, isn't it? Now that she and Henry are struggling. Rowan. His voice carried that gentle warning tone he'd used since I was 12. Whatever you're thinking. I'm thinking it's time for some answers. The words tasted like metal in my mouth. I'm thinking about how Henry systematically dismantled everything Dad built while she watched. I'm thinking maybe it's time they both faced what they did. Revenge won't bring him back, sweetheart. No. I smoothed the letter flat against my desk. But it might bring justice. My phone buzzed with a text, another message from my mother. An address for a cafe downtown, asking to meet tomorrow. My fingers hovered over the keys. I have to go, Uncle Bill. I'll call you later. I ended the call before he could protest, before his wisdom could pierce the armor of rage I'd spent years building. The city sprawled below my office window, oblivious to the war brewing in my heart. I typed my response, tomorrow. 2 p.m. Don't be late. The send button felt like a trigger being pulled. 13 years of carefully constructed peace, shattered by a single cream-colored envelope. But maybe that peace had always been an illusion. Maybe it was time to finish what started the day my father died, the day my mother chose Henry, the day everything changed. I grabbed my coat and headed for the door. I had 24 hours to prepare for battle, and this time, I wouldn't be the one left bleeding. The cafe buzzed with lunchtime chatter, but the corner booth might as well have been a tomb. My mother sat across from me, her hands wrapped around a cooling cappuccino. Looking exactly like the woman who walked out 13 years ago, just with deeper lines around her eyes. You look so much like your father. Her voice cracked on the last word. I kept my face blank, the way I'd practiced in boardroom negotiations. You didn't ask me here to discuss resemblances. She flinched. Good. Let her feel something for once. Her designer blouse hung loose on her frame. And her wedding ring, the gaudy thing Henry had replaced Dad's band with, slipped when she lifted her cup. Henry doesn't know I'm here, she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. He's changed, Rowan. Everything's changed. Changed like when he convinced you to sign over Dad's company? Or changed like when you let him ship me off to Uncle Bill's without a fight? The cup clattered against the saucer. That's not fair. I was grieving. For 3 months. I leaned forward. Dad was barely cold in his grave when you married him. When you let him start dismantling everything Dad built. A young family walked past our booth, their little boy laughing. My mother's eyes followed them, something raw and hungry in her expression. That's when I noticed the bruise, poorly concealed beneath her collar. Henry has a son now, she said suddenly. Your half-brother. Evan. He's 10. The news hit like a slap. A brother. A child who got to keep his mother while I lost mine. Congratulations, I said flatly. Is that why you're here? To play happy families? No, She reached into her purse, hands trembling. There are papers. Documents from before your father died. Henry made me hide them, but I kept copies. I think they prove. Mom? A sharp voice cut through the cafe. Jessica Larson stood at our table, Henry's daughter from his first marriage, her perfect features twisted in suspicion. What are you doing here? My mother's face drained of color. The papers disappeared back into her purse. Jessica, dear. I was just having lunch with your abandoned daughter? Jessica's smile was razor-sharp. How sweet. Dad will be so interested to hear about this. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. Still Daddy's little spy, Jessica? Some things never change. Some people never learn their place, she shot back. Mom, we're leaving. Now. Mom. The word landed like acid between us. My mother rose on shaky legs, avoiding my eyes. I'm sorry, Rowan. I shouldn't have. This was a mistake. The papers, I said quietly. What do they prove? Jessica grabbed my mother's arm. She said we're leaving. I watched them go, my mother's shoulders hunched, Jessica's manicured hand steering her toward the door. But I'd seen enough. The bruise. The weight loss. The terror when Jessica appeared. And somewhere in that purse, documents that might explain why Dad's death never felt quite right. My phone buzzed, Uncle Bill again. I let it ring, staring at the half-empty cappuccino my mother left behind. The same way she'd left me. But this time was different. This time, I saw the cracks in her careful facade. Whatever Henry had done to Dad's company, to our family, it was worse than I'd imagined. And my mother, for all her cowardice, had tried to tell me something today. I dropped cash on the table and headed for my car, already planning my next move. Jessica would run straight to Henry, which meant my mother would pay for this meeting. But she'd chosen to come anyway. After 13 years of silence, that had to mean something. The documents she mentioned were the key. I just had to figure out how to get them before Henry discovered their existence. And maybe, just maybe, I needed to meet this half-brother of mine. Evan. An innocent caught in Henry's web, just like I had been. My phone buzzed again. This time, I answered. Uncle Bill? I need your help with something. Uncle Bill's study smelled of leather and old books, just like it had when I was 12. But tonight, spread across his desk were copies of documents that made my stomach turn. Bank statements. Transfer records. Death certificates. Your mother dropped these off an hour ago. He stood at the window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. She was hysterical. Said Henry found out about your meeting. I picked up the medical examiner's report from Dad's accident. Heart attack while driving seemed too neat, too convenient. Especially with these bank records showing systematic withdrawals from the company accounts starting 3 months before his death. Did she say anything else? Just that she was sorry. And that she had to get back to Evan. Uncle Bill turned, his face grave. She had a black eye, Rowan. The paper crumpled in my fist. Henry? A sharp knock interrupted us. Aunt Clara burst in, her face pale. Turn on the news. Now. The flat screen flickered to life. Henry stood on the steps of what used to be Mitchell Transportation's headquarters, now renamed Larson Enterprises. His smile was razor-sharp as cameras flashed. Proud to announce our expansion into international markets, he was saying. This merger represents everything my late friend Philip Mitchell dreamed of for his company. Bastard, I whispered. There's more, Aunt Clara said softly. The camera panned to show my mother standing beside Henry, her bruises carefully concealed by makeup. And next to her, Jessica, wearing a diamond ring that looked eerily familiar. Is that, my voice caught. Your grandmother's ring, Uncle Bill confirmed. The one your father gave your mother. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, stay away from my family. Or the next accident won't be your father's. H. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Uncle Bill reached for the phone, but I pulled back. He's admitting it, I said. He's practically confessing to killing Dad. Rowan. Look at these numbers. I spread the bank statements across the desk. 3 months before Dad died, Henry started moving money. Small amounts at first, then larger. The day after the funeral, he married Mom and took control of everything. You can't prove any of this means? I can. A new voice joined us. We turned to find Jessica leaning against the doorframe, twisting my grandmother's ring on her finger. Uncle Bill moved protectively in front of me. How did you get in here? Your housekeeper knows me from the old days. Her smile was cold. I came to make a deal. With the person wearing stolen property? I shot back. With the person who has proof that your precious daddy wasn't as clean as you think. She pulled an envelope from her designer bag. Henry didn't just take over the company, Rowan. He saved it from your father's gambling debts. You're lying. Am I? She tossed the envelope onto the desk. Daddy Dearest had a secret account in the Caymans. He was bleeding the company dry long before Henry stepped in. Mom, your mother, knew. That's why she turned to Henry for help. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Bank statements, betting slips, loans, all in my father's name. Why are you showing me this? Jessica's facade cracked slightly. Because Henry's going to destroy everything, including my mother's shares in the company. He's already started with your mother. I want him stopped, but I need your help. The room felt too small, too full of ghosts and lies. Dad's gambling. Mom's betrayal. Henry's violence. And now Jessica, offering an alliance I never saw coming. What exactly are you proposing? Uncle Bill asked. A trade. Jessica twisted the ring off her finger and set it on the desk. This, plus everything I know about Henry's dealings, in exchange for your help taking him down legally. Through the board, the shareholders, whatever it takes. I stared at my grandmother's ring, remembering how it looked on Mom's hand before everything fell apart. Why should I trust you? Because Henry hurt my mother too. Jessica's mask slipped further, showing something raw underneath. And because I know what really happened the night your father died. The news droned on in the background, Henry's voice a constant reminder of everything he'd stolen. But now, finally, the pieces were falling into place. I picked up the ring. Tell me everything. Jessica's revelation about Dad's gambling felt like acid in my veins, but what she said next burned worse. Henry didn't just find your father that night. He orchestrated the whole thing. We sat in Uncle Bill's study, dawn creeping through the windows. The documents were spread across the desk like a roadmap of betrayal. Dad was meeting his bookie, Jessica continued, her composure cracking. Henry knew about it. He'd been tracking the gambling for months, waiting for the right moment. Uncle Bill's hand gripped the back of my chair. How do you know all this? Because I helped him. Jessica's voice broke. I was young, angry about my mother. Henry promised if I helped him take over Mitchell Transportation, he'd make sure I got what I deserved. A knock at the door made us all jump. Aunt Clara entered, her face ashen. Rowan, your mother's here. She's with Evan. My half-brother. The child who got everything I lost. Send them away, I said, but Jessica grabbed my arm. Wait. Evan might be the key. Henry's been moving money into trust funds under his name. If we can prove. He's 10 years old, I snapped. I'm not using a child as a weapon. Like Henry used you? Jessica's words hit their mark. I found them in the kitchen. Mom looked worse than at the cafe, her movements jerky and nervous. But Evan, he had Dad's eyes. He sat at the counter, homework spread out, looking so normal it hurt. Hi, he said, glancing up. Are you really my sister? Mom flinched. Evan, honey, why don't you go watch TV while I... No. The word came out sharper than I intended. Let him stay. We're all family, aren't we, Mom? She touched her wedding ring, Henry's ring, like a talisman. Henry's planning something. He's been meeting with lawyers, changing accounts. When he found out about the documents I gave Bill. He hurt you. It wasn't a question. Evan's pencil stopped moving. His shoulders tensed, and suddenly I saw what I'd been missing. The careful way he held himself. The watchfulness in those familiar eyes. Does Henry hurt you too, Evan? The silence was answer enough. Rowan, please, Mom whispered. I didn't know what to do. He controls everything, the money, the house, our lives. I thought I could protect Evan if I just... Like you protected me? The words tasted like ash. Jessica appeared in the doorway, her presence making Mom shrink further. Henry's on his way. Someone at your office tipped him off about the meeting. Evan's homework scattered as Mom grabbed his arm. We have to go. He can't know we were here. No. I moved between them and the door. You're not running this time. Not from him, not from the truth about Dad. What truth? Evan asked. Mom went pale. Rowan, don't. Your father killed mine. The words hung in the air like smoke. And our mother let him do it. Evan looked at Mom, really looked at her, maybe for the first time. Is that true? Before she could answer, car tires crunched on the gravel outside. Uncle Bill appeared with my coat. Back door. Now. Take them to the lake house. We'll handle Henry. I'm staying, Jessica said. He'll suspect something if I'm gone. I grabbed Mom's purse, Evan's backpack. Why are you really helping us, Jessica? Her smile was bitter. Because Henry killed my mother too. Heart attack, just like your father. I just couldn't prove it, until now. Headlights swept across the windows. Mom clutched Evan's hand, and in that moment, I saw the mother she could have been, should have been, to me. We have to go, I said, taking Evan's other hand. All of us. As we slipped into the pre-dawn darkness, I heard Henry's voice booming through the house. But for the first time since Dad died, I wasn't running from the past. I was running toward justice. And this time, I wasn't alone. The lake house felt like a fortress of secrets. 3 days we'd been here, and each hour brought new revelations from Mom's files. I sat at the kitchen table, spreadsheets and bank statements creating a paper trail of destruction. "You should eat something," Mom said, hovering nearby with a plate of sandwiches. Playing mother now, when it was far too late. Evan sat cross-legged on the couch, headphones on, trying to disappear into his video game. He hadn't spoken much since learning about Dad's death. My phone buzzed, Jessica's burner number. "Henry's making moves. He's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. Something about restructuring the company's assets. He's going to transfer everything before we can stop him." I glanced at the documents spread before me. "We need more time." "We don't have it." Jessica's voice cracked. "He's been asking questions about Mom's death. I think he knows I found her medical records." A crash from the living room made us all jump. Evan stood amid the remains of a glass of water, shaking. "Someone's outside." I moved to the window, careful to stay hidden behind the curtain. A black SUV idled at the end of the driveway, its headlights off. "Get your things," I told them. "Now." Mom grabbed the files while I shoved laptops into bags. Evan stood frozen, staring at the door. "It's okay," I said, taking his hand. "We're going to." The window exploded inward. Mom screamed. I pulled Evan down as glass rained around us. "Back door," I hissed, pushing them toward the kitchen. But as we reached it, headlights swept across the yard. Another SUV. My phone rang, Uncle Bill's ringtone. I answered on speaker as we huddled in the dark kitchen. "Henry's gone insane," he said without preamble. "He's filed kidnapping charges against you, Rowan. Claims you took Evan against court orders." "What court orders?" "The ones he forged this morning, backdated to last year. He's got judges in his pocket, sweetheart. You need to bring Evan back now." Mom clutched Evan closer. "No. He'll hurt him. If we go back, we lose everything," I said. "The evidence about Dad, about Jessica's mother. If you don't," Uncle Bill cut in, "you'll lose your freedom. Henry's serious about the kidnapping charges. And he's named Jessica as a co-conspirator." The sound of car doors slamming outside. Heavy footsteps on gravel. "There's another way," Evan said suddenly. His voice was steady, older than his years. "Dad's laptop. The one in his study. He never lets anyone touch it, but I know the password. I've seen him enter it." Mom stared at him. "What's on it?" "Everything. I've watched him sometimes, late at night. He keeps files about everyone, you, Rowan, Jessica's mom. He calls it his insurance." A fist pounded on the front door. "Mrs. Larson? This is the police. We have a warrant." Jessica's voice crackled through the phone. "I can get to the laptop. But you have to create a distraction. Give them Evan, let them think they've won." "No," Mom and I said simultaneously. "Trust me," Jessica insisted. "Henry will be focused on you, Rowan. On punishing you. He won't expect me to betray him. Not his loyal daughter." The back door handle jiggled. Time was up. I looked at Evan, seeing Dad's strength in his face. "Your choice, buddy. What do you want to do?" He squared his shoulders. "I want him to pay. For everything." Mom touched his cheek, then mine. For the first time in 13 years, I saw my mother instead of Henry's wife. Together, then. I nodded to Evan. "Remember the password?" "Phoenix Rising," he said. "Because Dad always says he rises from the ashes." The irony wasn't lost on any of us. The door burst open, flashlights cutting through the darkness. As officers swarmed in, I met Jessica's eyes through the phone screen and gave an imperceptible nod. The game was changing. Henry thought he was the Phoenix, But he'd forgotten one thing: in order to rise from the ashes, first you have to burn. The interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and defeat. Across the table, Detective Martinez spread out photos like playing cards: the lake house, Mom's bruises, Evan's scared face. Kidnapping. Conspiracy. Corporate espionage. She tapped each charge with a manicured nail. Mr. Larson has quite a story about you, Miss Mitchell. Through the one-way glass, I sensed Henry watching, savoring his victory. Mom and Evan were somewhere in the building, separated, probably terrified. And Jessica, radio silence since the raid. Where's my lawyer? On his way. But we both know how this looks. Martinez leaned forward. A successful businesswoman suddenly snaps, manipulates her troubled mother, endangers a child. I was protecting them. From what? A respected CEO? A man who, by all accounts, saved your father's failing company? The door opened. Henry walked in, followed by Uncle Bill. The betrayal in Bill's eyes cut deeper than any knife. I had to tell them, Rowan, Uncle Bill said softly. About your obsession with Henry, your paranoid theories about your father's death. My chest tightened. This wasn't right. Uncle Bill knew the truth, he'd seen the evidence. William has been very helpful, Henry said, his voice dripping concern. Explaining your mental state since your father's passing. How you never accepted his gambling problem, his suicide. Suicide? The word exploded from my lips. You murdered him. Martinez's pen scratched across her notepad. Henry shook his head sadly. You see? This is exactly what we're worried about. The delusions, the accusations. Just like your father near the end. My phone buzzed in the evidence bag on Martinez's desk. Jessica's burner number. But the detective reached it first, reading the message aloud. It's done. I'm sorry, Rowan. He gave me no choice. Henry's smile widened fractionally. Of course. He'd gotten to Jessica too, probably threatened her mother's insurance payout or worse. Your accomplice seems to have had a change of heart, Martinez noted. The evidence bag also contained Mom's files, but I knew without looking they'd been altered or replaced. Henry was too thorough, too connected. He'd planned this perfectly. Where's my mother? I asked, hating how my voice shook. Safe, Henry said. Getting the help she needs. And Evan is back where he belongs, with his father. You're hurting them. I'm protecting my family. He turned to Martinez. Just like I tried to protect Philip Mitchell from his gambling debts. Some people simply can't be saved from themselves. Uncle Bill wouldn't meet my eyes. Had Henry threatened him too? Or worse, convinced him I really was losing my mind? Your father's suicide note, Martinez said, sliding a familiar piece of paper across the table. Found in Mr. Turner's possession. Care to explain why you never mentioned it? The signature was perfect, Dad's exact handwriting. Henry must have been planning this for years, collecting samples, waiting for the right moment. That's not real, I whispered, but doubt crept in. What if I had been wrong? What if Dad's gambling, his death, everything I thought I knew? We can help you, Rowan, Henry said gently. There are excellent facilities. Go to hell. Martinez gathered her files. I'll give you a moment with your uncle. Mr. Larson, if you'll come with me. They left. The silence stretched between Bill and me like a chasm. What did he threaten you with? I asked. Rowan, please. Stop fighting. For your own good, just stop. Did you know? About Dad's gambling? Was I wrong about everything? He reached across the table, but I pulled away. Sometimes the truth isn't what we want it to be. My last ally, gone. And somewhere in this building, Mom and Evan were alone with their abuser. Jessica had betrayed us. And every shred of evidence we'd gathered had vanished or been twisted against me. The worst part? For just a moment, I wondered if Henry was right. If grief and anger had warped my memories, turned coincidence into conspiracy. But then I remembered Dad's eyes the last time I saw him alive. "Trust your instincts, kiddo," he'd said. "The truth always rises. Like a phoenix from the ashes." Detective Martinez's office door burst open. Jessica strode in, Henry's laptop clutched to her chest, Aunt Clara right behind her. "Sorry I'm late," Jessica said, her smile razor-sharp. "Traffic was murder." Henry's face drained of color. "Jessica, what are you?" "Phoenix Rising, Dad." She set the laptop on Martinez's desk. "Isn't that what you always say? Right before you destroy someone?" Martinez looked between us, her professional mask cracking. "What's going on?" "Show them," I said quietly. Jessica opened the laptop, pulled up files. "Everything's here. The offshore accounts, the forged documents, the real medical reports for both Philip Mitchell and my mother." Henry lunged for the computer, but Uncle Bill caught his arm. "Don't," Bill said, his voice heavy with regret. "It's over, Henry. You were in on this?" Henry snarled. "Had to make you think you'd won." Bill's grip tightened. "Had to keep you focused on Rowan while Jessica got what we needed." The office door opened again. Mom walked in with Evan, her spine straight for the first time in years. "I've given my statement, Detective. About Philip's murder, about the abuse, everything." Henry laughed, but it sounded hollow. "You have nothing." "I destroyed all the evidence. Except your insurance policy," Evan said. "The files you kept to control everyone. I watched you type that password so many times, Dad. Did you ever wonder why?" Martinez was already scrolling through the files, her expression hardening. "Mr. Larson, you need to sit down." "You ungrateful little," Henry wrenched free from Bill, lunging at Jessica. She stepped aside, letting him crash into the desk. "Ungrateful?" Jessica's voice cracked. "You killed my mother. Made it look like a heart attack, just like you did with Philip Mitchell. Because they both figured out what you really were." "They were weak," Henry spat. "Your mother was going to leave, take everything. And Philip? He was going to expose the embezzlement, ruin everything I'd built." "You built nothing," I said. "You just destroyed what others created." Martinez stood, reaching for her cuffs. "Henry Larson, you're under arrest. You're all just like them." Henry grabbed for the laptop, but this time Mom moved fastest, snatching it away. "No more," she said. "No more controlling us. No more hurting my children." "Your children?" He sneered. "The daughter you abandoned? The son you were too weak to protect?" "Yes." Mom's voice strengthened. "My children. The ones I failed. The ones I'm finally standing up for." Henry's hand went to his jacket. The glint of metal made my heart stop. "Dad, don't." Evan's warning came too late. The gun appeared so fast even Martinez was caught off guard. Henry backed toward the door, weapons sweeping across the room. "You think I didn't plan for this?" His smile was manic. "I always have a contingency. Always rise from the ashes. Now, Jessica, delete those files." "It's too late," Jessica said. "I already sent copies to the FBI, the SEC, and every major news outlet." The gun steadied on her. "You're lying. Check your phone." As if on cue, Henry's cell buzzed. "Breaking news alerts." His face contorted as he read the headlines. The shot rang out before anyone could move. But Henry hadn't pulled the trigger, Martinez had. He crumpled, clutching his shoulder, the gun clattering away. "That's for my sister," Martinez said, keeping her weapon trained on him as other officers rushed in. "Karen Martinez." Your first wife. The suicide that made me become a detective. As they led Henry away, Mom pulled Evan and me close. Jessica stood apart, watching her father's destruction with empty eyes. Jessica, I called. Thank you. She turned, Dad's ring glinting on her finger. I didn't do it for you. But maybe we can both stop living in the ashes now. Martinez collected the laptop, now crucial evidence. Miss Mitchell, we'll need statements from everyone. I nodded, feeling the weight of years lifting. The truth had finally risen, but not like a phoenix, like the sun after a long, dark night. Mom squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry, Rowan. For everything. I know, I said. And for the first time, I believed her. The Mitchell Transportation Building looked different in the morning light, its glass facade reflecting clouds instead of shadows. Dad's name still crowned the entrance, freshly restored after Henry's arrest. Ready? Uncle Bill asked, holding the door. The lobby buzzed with activity, employees, reporters, shareholders gathering for the emergency board meeting. Jessica stood at the reception desk, handling the chaos with practiced ease. She'd traded Henry's flashy style for something more subdued, more genuine. The board's waiting, she said, falling into step beside me. Mom's already inside. The boardroom felt smaller than I remembered from childhood visits with Dad. Now I sat in his chair, facing the people who'd let Henry destroy everything he built. The vote is unanimous, the head of the board announced. Mitchell Transportation will be returned to Mitchell Family Control, with Rowan Mitchell as CEO and Jessica Larson as COO. Mom squeezed my hand under the table. She looked different now, lighter, despite the shadows under her eyes. The divorce papers had been signed yesterday. As the room cleared, Evan lingered by the window. Does this mean I have to work here someday? Only if you want to, I said. You can be anything. He nodded, considering this new freedom. Henry's lawyer called again. About visiting. That's your choice too. Jessica gathered her files, her movements precise. The prosecutors want my testimony next week. About Karen, my mother. You don't have to do it alone, I said. I know. She touched Dad's old nameplate on the desk. Funny how revenge doesn't feel like I thought it would. Because it wasn't revenge, Mom said quietly. It was justice. For all of us. The door opened. Detective Martinez entered, carrying a familiar envelope. Found this in Henry's personal safe. Thought you should have it. Inside was a photograph, Dad and me at his desk, both laughing at some forgotten joke. On the back, his handwriting, for Rowan, trust your instincts. The truth always rises. He knew, I realized. He was gathering evidence against Henry before he died. And Henry kept the photo as insurance, Jessica added. Typical. Always keeping score. Martinez nodded to the boardroom window. Speaking of scores, you've got company. Outside, protesters gathered. Former employees Henry had fired, families he'd destroyed, all demanding answers. Their anger was justified, but it wasn't my burden anymore. What do we do? Evan asked. We rebuild, I said. Not just the company. Everything. Jessica straightened her jacket. I'll handle the press. I'll help, Mom offered. When Jessica hesitated, Mom added, please. Let me try to fix something. They left together, an unlikely alliance born from shared wounds. Evan followed, already comfortable in his role as the bridge between our fractured families. Uncle Bill studied the photo in my hands. You know, Phil once told me his biggest regret was not teaching you everything about the business before. Well, he taught me enough. I set the photo on Dad's desk, my desk now. He taught me to trust my instincts. And where are those instincts leading you now? Through the window, I watched Mom and Jessica addressing the crowd, Evan standing tall beside them. The truth had risen, yes, but not like Henry's phoenix, burning everything in its path. Instead, it had grown like a garden through concrete, transforming wreckage into something new. "Forward," I said. But not alone. Martinez paused at the door. "Henry's sentencing is next month. You planning to speak?" I thought of Henry in his prison cell, still plotting, still believing in his own mythology. Let him. His stories had no power here anymore. No, I decided. I have better things to say. The morning sun caught Dad's nameplate, throwing light across the boardroom. Outside, the crowd was dispersing, not in anger but in hope. Inside, the ghosts of the past finally began to fade. I opened Dad's old ledger, empty pages waiting. Time to write a new story. Not of revenge or rising phoenixes, but of truth and transformation, of families broken and rebuilt, of gardens growing through concrete. Time to trust my instincts.